committees. And we provide the related instruction to those signatory employers for apprentices and also skills training for our current members. So as we go forward, our hope is that those joint apprenticeship training committees, those multi-employer training programs, are recognized on an equal footing with other training providers as potential funding sources become available. So I appreciate the time and the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Jack. Thank you. Other comments in the room? I guess I have one. As we look forward and we're doing a joint plan, does it make sense that this public feedback component, this needs assessment effort, be joint as opposed to separate?
Chair Gilbertson. I think that's kind of the opportunity as we go into this next cycle. So there are and simplified a lot in the past 6 months. There are under Perkins and under WIO still some complexities in the act, but we have an opportunity here under what's required by Perkins of school districts and of colleges through this regional meeting process, through 406 jobs and the priority industries and the sector partnerships that are going to be stood up under that, to think about how all of this human effort comes together, cohesively. And I think it's a good timeline right now. We have the Perkins schools and teams coming off of their first experience of doing this regional work. We now have the 406 jobs framework. We're going to have the industry sector partnerships. On this timeline, I think we can be really thoughtful about both how do we ensure schools have a good way as they're doing what's required of them at the local level, to invite all of you and your colleagues more into those processes. And then to think about how 406 jobs, these regional processes help to drive each other. I think it's a space that Perkins can, and this regional process can really be strengthened by all of you. And we're excited to move forward with that as we look into the kind of next iteration.
Thank you, Joe. Just to piggyback off of that, as a school superintendent, formerly in a rural community, it was a requirement that my Carl Perkins team and I, my colleagues, host the stakeholder meeting. So each school used to be required to have a meeting annually to bring in these partners, and then they needed to supply that to the Department of Ed as well as the OPI, who they had at that meeting. And so the regional meetings, I think, are an incredible shift and opportunity where you can get more business and industry partners. You know, depending on the time of year, it was really hard for me to get someone from Ag in the room. And then obviously, you know, our business representatives are very busy. We're asking teachers that lead the CTE work to stay in the evening for this to try to meet the needs of the business partners. So sometimes they were, you know, challenging to pull together and hard to get representation at. So I think the regional model is really the way to go. And I think you guys expressing the importance of these meetings and helping us get more business and industry partners there would be huge. So I really like the new regional format. And I think it's an opportunity to have more comprehensive meetings with more stakeholders in the room than a small rural community might have locally. And also think about how they could tie in together with those regional partners, even though they might be a little ways down the road. In Montana, we're used to overcoming those challenges. So just to give you some perspective from the school side of it, why it was kind of siloed before, those were the requirements. But we're working beyond that with these new opportunities and flexibilities. So thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Adam. I think this is a really good example of how our federal friends are moving faster with the aspirational directive than the rules of how we all do this on the ground. I think we saw a little bit of telegraphing of this in late 2024. That's what led Montana to really jumping on board to passing House Bill 823, which brought this meeting and the meeting today. I think we saw a little bit more clarity last July when they issued the interagency agreements between U.S. Department of Labor and U.S. Department of Ed. And I think we saw a little bit more yet in January of this year when TEGL 725 came out and they were more directive. I think as recently as a month ago, we saw a little bit more yet when our friends at the Department of Labor and Department of Ed started holding large national webinars, speaking to stakeholders like us and agencies, forecasting and answering questions. And I do think that as we move into the summer, we're going to see even more. But some of this conversation about what does the federal administration envision with combined WIO and Perkins plans, and how do they envision further yet in incorporating SNAP, TANF education and training programs into the same combined document. I think more information is forthcoming. I think it's awesome that we were able to have our partners here hold their meeting in the meeting. And I think more of this is going to be needed. I think we'll see our federal partners direct that stakeholder engagement even more prescriptively in future TEGLs. That's what I'm hearing from the Department of Labor, is that they're going to instruct that these plans unite even more. I think this is a consequence of 30-day sprints from federal policymakers, and we're all keeping up as fast as we can. But I think given those kind of 3 milestones of the interagency agreement, the TEGL in January, and the webinars as recently as last month, we know more now than we did a year ago, and I think we'll know more in a year yet.
Okay, I have one more point to just ask a question about, but I did want to circle back. Jackie alluded to some middle school support that we have within Perkins. That is the Rural Reserve Grant. So the last state plan board, when we just did our last rewrite, decided to utilize our rural reserve, which is about $60,000 of that money focused towards middle school CTE, with a couple of kind of caveats of that ability to apply is that the high school district had to already apply for Perkins. So it had to be a Perkins LE already. And that they are working to tie their pathways directly into that high school CTE program. And so those were $5,000 grants that schools could apply for. Because of the success of that over the last 3 or 4 years, we actually started doing it prior to it being put directly in the plan. You know, legislatively, there was additional money set out to follow kind of that same format that our local middle school districts could apply for some $5,000 mini grants to help support CTE and career exploration and get them tied into their high school programs a little better. So we're really hoping to see more of that middle school influence as well. So I was really happy to hear that you had a lot of middle school and high schools. I'm like, where was it? It was over here at Gallatin College for that career fair. So it's good to hear. Our last question that we have, and then I will kindly hand it back over, is how can this work be leveraged to support our 406 job sector and public sector and partnership strategies? Yeah, how can this CLNA or the work that we're doing be leveraged to support 406 jobs, and then looking at the public and private partnership strategies as well?
Can I interject here? Part of the 406 Jobs Year 1 work plan incorporates local sector partnerships, which we are just about to go through training and then launch those. This is the perfect opportune time to then align what you guys are doing. And it's interesting because we're going to try to roll those out on a regional level, but really locally, how they get done with industry solving the problems. Everybody else needs to be at the table to give them solutions. And so this is a perfect time for us to be inclusive and aligned with what you need to know. I understand a federal requirement. So when Susie and Joe were talking, when you talk about your Perkins, that is a federal requirement. Those CLNAs, say that fast 3 times, is a federal requirement, which great. But when we think of Montana and 406 jobs, how do we align all of the systems for the betterment of the employers and also training the individuals, no matter what their age.
I think one of the things that we're trying to sort out is in private industry, what can we do as we advance outreach into youth and career apprenticeship opportunities. We're trying to understand what will get funded, whether that's grant opportunities. So I don't want to iterate on maybe this is a program that I'll be able to get some assistance with. So I think as we develop this whole program, the private industry wants to use their funds and understand where the grant side, whether it's private or public funds are available, and how do we structure it so that we can work in tandem and apply for these funds to amplify what we're doing. But Susie, I heard you talk a few times just on getting our subject matter experts into schools and getting it, tier 4 certified so we can do that. We want to, but we're trying to navigate the path on if we spend these funds, if we continue to do some private investment, how can that get matched so that the burden isn't entirely off our bottom line? So that how should we build it without just guessing? So,
Thank you. And I would like to just add, Portia made a comment earlier when she was talking about thinking about as all of these things are coming down the pike, how do you braid the funds? How do you think about Perkins differently and WIOA funding? And then now we've got the workforce Pell and industry. We're going to listen to you because you should be driving this.
I just wanted to expound on what Josh said over there. With our JATC, we had some grants a couple of years ago that came up, but by the time we had written them up, got a grant writer to write them, do all that stuff, we were actually losing money. So it was, you have to continually send in all this paperwork and follow up and this and that. And, for 60 apprentices, it just wasn't worth putting in for the grant. So we got $5,000, but it cost us $6,000 to pay for a grant writer to get it. It's really worth that. Even if you're making $1,000 or $2,000, it's really worth that time. So that's something that it needs, maybe we can pull together, maybe, or, somehow do this. I don't know what the answer is, but, and the other thing that we deal with a lot is, and this is more outside of what we're doing here, jobs. Like I have 160 people on my list. I would love to hire them all. I can't hire them wherever I can put them. So, that's another thing is we need jobs in the state. We're losing Boise right now, and I'm not going to throw this out, but Boise's building a chip plant down there, and they have 60 to 80 of our workers down there. They're not coming back. So we need to continue to grow, get these people in there, but we also need to try and keep them here, not somewhere else.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those were good comments. And I think that is, right back to Shannon's question, is those regional meetings, and that's the whole point of the comprehensive needs assessment, is to find out, and so rather than so localized, we're trying to expand those to capture more input and information about. So it's really us having that opportunity to listen to industry and see what specifically we can do better. And you guys have provided a lot of that today. And I think the more that we can listen and learn from what the needs are in the field, like you said, the fundamental mathematics or the soft skills, or whether it's the barriers of insurance that you were talking about for those teenagers, so that we can take on, that's the goal of these meetings, is to find out what the challenges and barriers are for industry partners so that we can all work together and solve those problems. So I'm excited to have SWIB more involved in those and do those in a more of a joint fashion. And I think regionally makes things a lot easier in Montana. So we don't all have to travel quite as far, but we can all get involved in these really important discussions so that we can hear what the needs are. And regionally, they can be different depending on the industries, as we know, vary across our vast state greatly.
I might just wrap this section up by saying that it is sometimes striking to see the difference in approach of institutions governed by the same state laws and the same federal statutes of how we're going to tackle a program. I think regional may help us because sometimes it's the easiest way to say no is to say there's a House bill that says I can't do it, or I can do it, take a pick. But how do we actually make it work? And I think as we stood up the Build Montana program, there were two schools. One opened the door and said, we're gonna figure this out with you. The other gave us a lot of reasons why it wasn't gonna work. And so how do we get that establishment of, we're gonna figure this out together because it's the right way to do it. If we've got a law that is holding us back, then that conversation should be, is the intent of the law right? Are we exercising it right? And if the times have changed, then we need to go back and ask for that to be looked at. And I think there's a great opportunity to do that at this point. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Susie. I think that regional perspective is really important. I want to take us back to 3 years ago in 2023 when the SWIB was meeting in a different day and a different format for SWIB. And at that time, this board hadn't been elevated by the governor, by the department, or by the work yet. It was basically just a perfunctory board to approve the annual WIOA plan and to sign off on any sanctions for any recipients of WIOA dollars that weren't performing. The governor challenged us to elevate the SWIB, to be the convening body and to be the voice of industry. Because like myself, the governor comes from industry. And it is so hard for industry partners to invest in training, least of all, to leave their job and their business that they're running, and then to leave all the investments and the time that they're making training people, and then to leave yet again, to engage with government time and time and time again, and say the same thing to all of the different stakeholders in government. I know that was my experience for 20 years as an equipment dealer in Eastern Montana, is that I had to figure out who in each state agency to find and knock on that front door and keep saying the same thing until we could convene some shared meetings. That was really the feedback that we got throughout the formation of 406 jobs, is that industry wanted one place and one convener and one set of agendas to follow so that they knew, ooh, that's a topic I want to engage on and I'm coming there. And that further became the framework for your recommendation to the governor for local sector partnerships. So if I could just leave us anchored in that, the governor's directive in 406 jobs and the one-year strategic plan that we provided to him was to create local sector partnerships based on the MACO maps. MACO is the Montana Association of Counties. It is 11 regions across the state. And each of those regions will be given the opportunity to have professionally facilitated local sector partnerships in the 6 high demand industries that we all set forth in 406 jobs. Now, do I think that my hometown of Northeast Montana needs an advanced manufacturing, computing, and photonics local sector partnership? Maybe not yet, but I think Jason's going to get them there someday. But so each region with professional facilitation will have the opportunity to convene up to 6 sectors. And then I know we are all keenly aware that there are other sectors of our economy that are just as important, that are also driving GDP and output, whether that's extraction, timber, natural resources, agriculture, things like that, that absolutely will facilitate those too, alongside the 406 jobs priority sectors. But I think I want to leave us anchored in what the governor's ask of us was. If we go back to the first time we had NGA out with us to facilitate this conversation in Glendive, of all places, when we were talking about local sector partnerships, he challenged us to create one easy entry point for industry to bring their input to government. And he promised us that using his business acumen and his connections, that if we made it easy for industry to find us as state agencies, that he would do his part to get industries to invest on the back end in people and finances. But we can't keep creating multiple points of entry and going back to that system where a business leader that's passionate about offing in their industry has to knock on every door in Helena. That's what the SWIB and the local sector partnerships is trying to break down, is this one convening body. And so I commit to all of you that anytime a local sector partnership meets under 406 jobs, we will make space in that conversation for all of this. And I invite any of you to provide feedback along the way to Tammy of how we can strengthen that so that our employers do just have the one door to knock on.
We look forward to carrying that message forward to our secondary and post-secondary partners as well. I want to thank you all. If you have Perkins specific questions that come about after you leave here, please feel free to reach out to Jackie or myself. Thank you for the extended time, and I will turn it back over to Chair Robertson. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move to the next agenda item. So we're gonna turn it over to Crystal Armstrong. You have time right now. Seeing none. If you're ready, Crystal. Or I can hold the public comment period open and allow you.
All right, thank you, Chair Gilbertson. We will have pretty pictures up there for you momentarily. Until then, you're stuck with me and my over caffeinated voice. So hopefully we'll have something up there for you shortly. But I am so excited to talk to all of you today. I was presenting earlier at the Apprenticeship Advisory Council, and I let them know that they have the opportunity to get excited with me about bureaucracy. We're going to do a little bit of that again this afternoon. I know we're hitting that 2 o'clock slump, but I promise that this will be more exciting than most state bureaucracy. And so I hope that you all are excited to talk about this with me too. So as you've heard folks reference today a couple times, both our partners from the National Governors Association and then folks throughout the presentation, it is that guy. We are, for the first time ever, submitting a combined WIOA and Perkins state plan in Montana. And this comes as sort of a culmination of a bunch of work that's happened, both at the federal level and some work that this SWIB has made possible for us. And so what we've seen from the federal level is a whole bunch of guidance, a whole bunch of encouragement, and frankly, a whole bunch of insistence that we make this happen. And so we've been able to get to work. Myself, I want to recognize our partners from OCHI and from OPI who have also been great partners in getting this work done. I also want to recognize my team in the back, Chris Bradley, who is our Data and Operations Bureau Chief, and Sarah Wimmer, who oversees our WIOA workforce programs, who really have worked day and night to bring you the plan that has been out for public comment now for quite a while, so that everybody can see, oh, hey, look at that. We've got pictures. Told you you wouldn't be stuck with me for too long. So that we can see everything so that you can see everything that we've been working on and how all of the work that you've done has played into that. Ellie, I don't know what slide we're on. Okay. Do I have control over that or are you?
No, it's
Okay, she's in charge, so we're gonna run with it. All right, so we're gonna talk through just a couple things today. I'm gonna talk through some of the things that led us to this point, also about some of the specific changes that were made within the plan that are informed by that. We're also going to talk about some of the things that have been changed in the WIOA or in the Perkins plan as well. And I'm going to invite Shannon and Jackie to come back up here as well and share some of those specifics from their portion of the plan that is now combined with the WIOA work that we are doing. So, like I said, this update matters a ton because this is the first time that we are submitting this joint plan. This brings together, workforce development, adult education, career and technical education, and work-based learning into a unified planning framework rather than treating them as these sort of individual silos. It also marks a shift in our posture. In our earlier planning cycle, a lot of the language that we had focused on preparing for alignment or building relationships or identifying opportunities to coordinate. And what the plan talks about now is the work that we're doing and the work that is starting. And the work that our teams are actively engaging in to make these things a reality. The other reason that this plan matters is that the draft reorganizes everything around 406 jobs, which is the plan that you all have developed. It focuses specifically on the work in the year one work plan, the state implementation priorities, and the federal push for more integrated talent systems. For the board, this means that this isn't just a compliance document, like Commissioner Swanson had originally mentioned. It's increasingly a shared strategy document that we can all use to connect state policy direction, federal expectations, and the on-the-ground workforce delivery that we all get to do together. So, I will not go into a ton of specific detail on this, but I provided reference to several different federal updates. These are different interagency agreements and then also a recent program memorandum that went to our education partners. These are all some of the things that have been signaled to us around expectations for alignment between education and workforce. The first was the initial partnership mention that talked about WIOA Title II and Perkins. The second was elementary and secondary education partnerships. The third focused on post-secondary education partnerships. And the fourth, which I think is incredibly impactful and really meaningful for the work that we're doing here, was from OCTAE, which if you don't know, at the Department of Labor, if someone uses an acronym that you don't recognize, you are obligated or eligible to boo them. So as I'm using some of these acronyms, feel free to boo me. It is welcome and it's a nice break from said bureaucracy. OCTAE, Office of Constituent. Oh, OCTAE, can you give us the acronym?
Office of Technical.
Career technical adult education. There we go. So saved myself one boo. I phoned a friend. All right. So this slide is important because it shows that Montana isn't just moving in isolation. The federal government is sending us a very clear message. All of these different memorandums and interagency agreements ask us to really focus on how we're reducing the distance between education and workforce, how we're centering employer voices, and how we're making sure that as we prepare young people to move through their education and career prep work, that we're thinking about things and how work intersects together, not how one stage starts and then ends, and then another stage starts and then ends, but that it's a continuum. So we were really set up well to do this work. Am I whistling? That's okay. We were set up really well to begin this work. Last year, House Bill 823 created an important policy foundation for us. It formalized the expectation that the newer revised Perkins planning would coordinate with or be included in the federal WIOA combined state plan, which is what we're sharing with all of you today. The plan identifies HB 283 as an accelerator because it helped move this from sort of this abstract goal into an actionable piece of work that we could conduct for this 2026-2027 school year, program year. It also has implications for all of you in your role on SWIB. rather than being positioned as a future stakeholder in alignment, you all have the ability to influence the plan that we're submitting right now. And I know that every single one of you has read all 325 pages and are loaded to the gills with comments and input for us. But it's an important shift in governance. It means that alignment isn't something that's just happening within agency staff. It's not just me and Shannon and Jackie talking about these things. It's all of you weighing in from a strategy level and from that 30,000-foot lens that is so valuable that we can't provide from our government seats, that only you can provide from the chairs that you're sitting in with the experience that you bring. So this is more just for your entertainment purposes than anything. There's a whole lot that is new in this plan. We have over 40 new pages of LMI strategy information. There's 76 mentions of 406 jobs, and yes, I counted all of those twice. There's 325 total pages, and throughout the entire plan, our programs teams have worked really hard to make sure that both within the WIOA work and the Perkins work, the directive of 406 jobs, the works that we're doing, things like America's Talent Strategy are really reflected in all of the ways that our programs are implemented, and that the work that we're doing is reflective of those higher level visions. It's not just a continuation of the work that we have been doing, that it's truly all intersecting with each other and all coming with that guidance. I think everyone had a copy of America's Talent Strategy within your packet. For those of you who may be newer to SWIB or who have not spent as much time with it as I have, I joke that it's tattooed, these 5 pillars are tattooed on the inside of my eyeballs. But the 5 pillars within America's Talent Strategy that we do use as sort of guiding focus, as a guiding focus for the work that we're doing is just a way for us to guide ourselves and keep ourselves accountable to where we want to be. The first is industry-driven strategies, and this just means that we align education and workforce systems with the real employer demand, so the trainings lead to actual jobs. The second is worker mobility. This means that we want to make sure that more people enter and stay in and then advance in the workforce through clearer pathways and better supports. Having integrated systems is the whole purpose of putting together this combined plan, making sure that fragmented programs and agencies are connected into one coordinated talent development system. Accountability means that we're tying public investment to measurable outcomes, not just things that we think are important, but to jobs and to wages, to graduation, to all of the things that matter to a person in their lifetime and to Montana overall and to our economy. Flexibility and innovation. This is something that's been really exciting for us and which is really something that Montana can take advantage of because we are one small town across a whole bunch of miles. We can build a workforce system that can adapt quickly to things like AI, to technology change, and to shifting labor market needs. So Montana was ready for this when the opportunity came. Montana was ready for a combined plan because much of the alignment work was already underway before the modification was even necessary. Cross-agency collaboration was happening. We had House Bill 823 work already underway, and the state was building from our existing experience and that 406 job year 1 work plan that's part of our own readiness story. We've got 12 priority initiatives and 46 metrics, and it gave the state a practical framework for implementation, including how we can define shared priorities, how we can set expectations, and how we can measure progress across agencies and initiatives. The draft also points to existing work on labor market information. I'm going to again credit Chris Bradley in the back and our economist team who pulled together a whole bunch of new economic information. The plan includes, I think, about 20 pages, Chris, is that accurate, of new labor market information? I'm going to give you credit for 20 pages. Also riveting content, but really, I think, informative of where we are in the state and why this work is important, and why we do have those 6 key industries identified. We talk about apprenticeships and one-stop coordination. We talk about credentials, and I think we've all heard everybody talk about credentials a little bit today, why they're important and what that's going to look like moving forward. This matters because merging between these 2 plans is operationally meaningful. It's not symbolic. And we already have mechanisms in place that can support more integrated implementation, like our credential registry that we've been able to coordinate on and build out and expand. We've got some rulemaking starting on that coming up here shortly as well. And so what you can see is that the plan is reflective both of the direction of where we want to go and where we already are. So with America's Talent Strategy, the state plan reflects, I made this a really big font for all of you who have really good eyes. What I really wanted to do was show you all of the different ways that America's Talent Strategy is already reflected in the state plan. So these were some areas that we built in some of that work. Like I mentioned, our credential registry is built in there. We've got employer input. The plan uses SWIB-led sector partnerships. We've got our year 1 work plan. We've got the combined WIOA and Perkins plan that treats workforce development, CTE, and work-based learning as one. We've got AI literacy embedded as a statewide expectation. We also have a focus on responsible automation, skills-based hiring, and equipping Montanans with AI skills. We've got coordinated employer engagement across WIOA and Perkins systems to inform program design, curriculum development, and work-based learning that Jackie and Shannon just talked about and what those are going to look like moving forward. And we've got credentials and work-based learning. The plan emphasizes industry-recognized credentials, the registry, dual credit, pre-apprenticeship, and registered apprenticeship. So these are all showing up in ways that are reflected of those 5 pillars in America's Talent Strategy. So we've worked really hard to make sure that what's happening within the Montana plan is really reflective of what we know that the feds are asking for and expecting to see from us. The most recent guidance that we did receive was from Octay, which you already heard, so you don't get to boo me. And what they provided to us were some very specific areas over here on the left where they expect WIOA and Perkins to be aligned. And they were very explicit about these areas. So we have employer input, labor market analysis, credentials of value, work-based learning, and shared data and accountability. And they told us in a very straightforward way from the U.S. Department of Education, these are the things that we expect to be aligned across these plans. And so our draft plan, which by the way, actually was drafted before this came out, does all of these things already. And so we were really excited to see that we captured that. Our draft plan has SWIB-led sector partnerships. So we've got the employer input. We have shared sector priorities and a common economic narrative. We've got the sector reports that are coming out. So we've got labor market analysis. Credentials of value we're dealing with through our credential registry, our eligible training provider list that we're enhancing, and we're talking about workforce Pell as soon as I wrap up here. Work-based learning, we're talking about dual credit, work-based learning opportunities specifically, which are being built into the credential registry as we speak. Pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship, which some of you heard about this morning from me. And we've also got our registered apprenticeship, which here we are in the middle of apprenticeship week, which is exciting. We've also got 406 jobs metrics, our sector briefs, and stronger integration language, helping us with our shared data and accountability. And so we're really on the right path, making sure that the work that we've incorporated into the plan aligns with what is expected of us from our federal partners. Next slide. And all of this, I think we owe a big thank you to you because 406 Jobs really did help us rewrite that strategy. I'm not going to explain to everyone what 406 Jobs is because I think by now you're all well aware. But on August 11th, 2025, that executive order 5-2025 did give this great big task to the SWIB to develop that work. You gave us an excellent work plan, and we're hard underway at that work. But it really captures what 406 Jobs has done by becoming the organizing framework for us. And that made redrafting the strategy portion of this plan really simple for us. We have a strategy and you gave it to us. And so we were able to build all of the work that we've got in the plan around all of the work that you've put together for us to do. We've been able to look at our specific programs within the Department of Labor and within other state agencies and make sure that the way that we're talking about it and the way that we're thinking about it aligns with this overarching umbrella framework for us. So within the plan, 406 Jobs shows up in a few different ways. Overall, you know, it's got kind of a front and center seat talking about the vision and goals. The plan now defines Montana's workforce vision around those 4 pathways, the 0 barriers, and the 6 sectors. When we talk about supporting clients in job service offices, we're talking about 0 barriers. When we're talking about the way that we execute work with apprenticeships, we're talking about the 6 sectors and how we're going to make sure that we're serving all of those sectors. When we talk about 4 pathways to the workforce, we're making sure that we're making space and addressing opportunities through all 4 of those pathways. And so you've really given us the opportunity to lay out a plan that captures 406 Jobs as our overarching umbrella. It shows up in employer services. The SWIB and sector partnerships are described as the organizing structure for business engagement. And we've got that opportunity to share that with all of you today. And then finally, implementation and accountability. That year 1 work plan gives us some really specific measurables. You're going to hear about those later. I think tomorrow, is that right, Tammy? You'll hear about some of those tomorrow about the work that's already underway. I'm going to talk about just a couple specific WIOA content updates, and then I'm going to let our friends talk about some of the specific contents that we made within the Perkins portion of the plan as we integrated those 2 together. There were a couple big things that we did to update things that have changed since the 2024 original drafting of this version of our plan. The first was updating adult education, since that has moved Title II adult ed under the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. Excuse me. The labor market section was also refreshed with current unemployment data, employment growth, openings, and information about sector demands. Finally, the plan added stronger language around co-enrollment in thinking about the ways that our agencies are expected to intersect and thinking about the conversations that are happening at the federal level about alignment between USDOL and USED and the same expectations that are happening at that they have for us at the state level. We talked about that. We also talked about data alignment. Through House Bill 949 and the Education and Data Workforce Governing Board, we continue to make progress on a shared research agenda where we're able to advance our opportunities to share data, to learn about what things look like, how Montana students do in the Montana workforce, and everything that happens in between. We talked about AI readiness and some of the things that are happening in the state to prepare everyone, whether that be students, whether that be workers, or whether that be businesses who want to learn how to use AI to become more efficient in the work that they do. We talked about remote and short-term credentialing. We talked about the new Office of Reentry, which House Bill 718 by Representative Carrie Seekins-Crow helped us stand up. We got a shout out in the plan. We also talked about the important work that our Office of the Tribal Liaison is doing to make sure that we've got our tribal partners engaged across the state and that we are doing appropriate tribal consultation. And so all of these have been built into the plan to make sure that the transitions that we've been making over the last couple of years have been updated and reflect the current status of the work that we're doing and the alignment with both 406 Jobs and America's Talent Strategy. I'm gonna take a pause and turn it over so that you can get some updates on some of the Perkins refinements.
Okay, I'm gonna go through this really quickly because you got to hear from me a lot of the things that I'm very proud of with our partnerships across systems. But one thing I love to think about with this Perkins refinement is that, you know, Perkins and WIOA used to kind of be friends that were like on the other opposite sides of a room and like would wave to each other and like sometimes try to figure out how to work with each other. Now we are standing next to each other, holding hands, and everything is hopefully going to be aligned moving forward. It really is a pleasure to work with all of the teams that are at the different agencies, and I feel like we are off to a really good start. It really ties all aspects of Perkins and WIOA together. So that we can collaborate better together. We've been trying to do a lot of this work on the Perkins side. Now that there's this formalized agreement to work together, we just have a lot more opportunity and a lot more resources right at our hands. 406 jobs was not released in 2024 when we wrote the last iteration of Perkins. So it was really important that we updated quite a few sections in Perkins to reflect those priorities from our state government perspective and make sure that we are working toward the same goals that DLI and the governor's office and so many of our partners across the state are working toward. That alignment is just really important from our perspective so that we can, you know, trickle that that guidance down to our schools who are spending the money. And, you know, like I said, this alignment really matters for Perkins. It opens the door to a lot more resources. It helps us figure out ways to collaborate in just such an easier way, and it opens resources up for our schools to take advantage of because they know that these are two integrated programs. A lot of this work was always prioritized, but now that it's formalized, it's easier to point to when we make certain decisions or when we ask our schools to make decisions that strengthen a lot of their workforce programs and their alignment with things that WIOA is doing in their communities. Again, just want to reiterate the benefits of these combined planning, the formalized way that both programs are aligned to meet the goals of 406 jobs. It really does just open up so many opportunities for collaboration, especially at our local eligible agencies who might be looking to partner with folks state level, industry level, community level to be able to get a lot of their good work done.
All right, so to kind of button things up here, this draft advances all of the work that we're doing together significantly. We did have a fairly short amount of time to do the initial merge though. And I think that we do have a lot more work that we do want to do. And so we've got a great stepping stone here to continue to build on this opportunity. And so over the next couple of years, we're looking forward to ways that we can continue to expand that work. Between 2026 and 2028, our state teams can look more at opportunities to share data, to coordinate intake and referrals, to look at co-enrollment opportunities, more effectively braiding our funding, and just general alignment strategies. SWIB and the Perkins Committee will continue to have a key role in guiding us in all of the work that we do need to do there. And where further alignment should be recommended, and where we can do better work together and do a better job of aligning further. So as part of this process, we did receive a little bit of public comment, and I was trying actually in real time over the last hour to update the slide because we got like 3 more that came rolling in. Unfortunately, I didn't get them all in, but I've got some of them up here. Overall, the public comment has been really enthusiastic and very supportive. These are just a few that have shown up so far. Missoula County Adult Education asked us to make just a quick update to expand information about who or the types of career exploration tools that are used for some of those adult learners. The Montana After School Alliance gave us some ideas about ways that we can expand integration for some of the work that they do in serving that after school population and recognizing that making work possible for parents, that after school care is a really important, vital part of of that process. The Scaffold Initiative was really supportive of the plan overall and really excited for the work that Montana is doing. They encouraged us to think about childcare as workforce infrastructure. And they wanted us to think about using technology to enable or help us overcome geographic challenges. They wanted us to make that Perkins integration count and make sure that as we think about that, we think about ways to really do that in a complete way. And they also talked about agriculture and the workforce pipeline in the ag space. We got a comment from Plains Physical Therapy that wanted to talk about healthcare as a priority pathway, which we do have as one of our 6 priority pathways. They talked about rural and small employers, making sure that they're represented in workforce government. Talked about expanding registered apprenticeship and licensed healthcare roles, which through RHTP, we're really excited that we do have the opportunity to do. They talked about AI literacy and adult education as a bridge into healthcare careers. We got comment from 0 to 5 as well here just recently. They were very supportive of the plan and talked also about childcare being a really important resource for supporting the workforce. We also heard from a drywall company and talking about supporting businesses with opportunities to help themselves grow their businesses. And so those were the main areas of public comment. There was nothing, nobody who was particularly feisty. Everything in general was very supportive. I promise I would tell you if there was. But we were really pleased overall with the comments that we did get and glad to share those with you here today. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you do have, and I'm excited that we got back up. I knew that caffeine would pay off.
Oh, we've got a question in the back, sorry.
My wife says I'm loud, so I don't need a microphone. Christian Watney, Place Frank, will focus specifically on rural areas and the regional place of critical access hospitals and affiliates, some wholly owned, but I would love to add OT and speech to that PT realm, like to cover the whole umbrella of therapists, because we just had such a hard time, and even in Billings for that matter, recruiting those people.
Super. Yeah, I think we do have some of those that we are actually adding to the credential registry. And Chair, I know that we actually also had one more comment. I don't know if you wanted vocational rehab to be able to share their specific. Did you want to share any information about your additions to the plan, Chanda, before we moved on? No. Okay.
While we're in transition, if there are any public comments from online, we'll take them as well. Oh, we have one here.
I just wanted to, thank you. I just wanted to say that, we've heard from educators, thank you. We've been working a lot, obviously, focusing more energy towards middle school, which is really exciting because we hear more and more that the more experience that earlier on students can figure out what they want to do or even learn what they don't want to do is more helpful for their pathway, and getting experiences at Billings Clinic and at the Billings Hospital was really just incredible to see in action. Every age of students there working, and Joe and I got to be there together that day, and so to see high school students getting that on the job training, and then to see college students in there, and just the whole gamut was incredible. So I think that those are just great partnerships that we have across the state. And we just got done wrapping up our, as was mentioned earlier, FFA, Skills USA, all of those different programs that we have, the CTSOs across the state, where students get to experience a lot of this hands-on learning and get those introductions in these areas are critical. And I got to be a judge at the Skills USA, and to just see this young lady so passionate about welding, for example, and all the different skills that those kids brought to the table was incredible. So if any of you in the industry, I'm sure many of you already have, but if you have a chance to to participate in one of those and be a judge, or just go walk through and see the students' products. It's a pretty incredible experience. And I wanted to just end on the note that I apologize, I won't be here in person tomorrow, but we do have the Department of Education coming into town, as Commissioner Swanson said, so I will be there, but I might try to zoom in. And next door, we have the RISE Tribal Education Summit going on. So we have a whole bunch of staff and students from all over the state in Ballroom A and across campus as well. So feel free to pop in and take a peek if you get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
200 kids over there. Yeah, thank you.
All right, can you hear me? Yep, okay. Hi, I'm Chanda Hermanson. I'm the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation at DPHHS, which is Title 4 of WIOA. So I'm just going to give you some updates on our portion of the state plan. I know we're running out of time. We're a little over here. So I'm just going to try to condense what I had prepared and just talk about our sections where we specifically talked about 406 jobs. And I want to echo Crystal's comments about thanking you for the framework and teeing us up for some really great work and kind of restructuring what we were up to. We really appreciate it, and our staff are so excited to have a different focus and coming at their work as career counselors through a different lens. It's really re-energized some of our counseling practices. So one of the first things we did, as noted in the state plan, is that we repurposed one of our positions to be a part-time public relations specialist. One of the goals in the 406 jobs is to tell the workforce story, and vocational rehabilitation definitely was not telling our workforce story. So we have a PR person on staff, we now have social media, and we are celebrating workforce wins at least monthly and always highlighting a high demand sector that was highlighted in 406 jobs. So that was our first step towards improving our workforce story and getting the word out there and how we're impacting the different sectors. Alongside OPI, we've also implemented Level All to help our career counseling practices, and aligned with Level All, we've also changed our learning management system. It's called the SLMS. So career counselors really understand the high demand sectors you all identified. So they are learning how and now can talk differently about those sectors to the job seekers that they're serving. Previously, a client would come in the door and we'd say, what do you want to do? And we'd start down that path with them. And we were really trying to change the practice so they can get real information to the job seekers about what's happening in their community and are starting to meet the industry leaders in their community. So those job placements are more efficient and having an impact. And we're not just, what do you want to do? So we're proud of that and aligning those two tools that the counselors are using. We're evolving our services to employers. Like I said, getting out there in the communities, meeting our industry leaders to help with those just those partnerships. I know we're not yet to the sector partnership, but developing those relationships. Also looking at apprenticeships differently. We've always just looked at ourselves as an entry point, and through the 406 jobs lens, we've thought about and have been successful in partnering with our partners at DLI in helping apprenticeships that are already in the system rather than just the entry point. So over the last 8 months or so, we've helped about a dozen apprenticeships, specifically in plumbing and electricians. We're not serving them as they'll be our client, but we're serving them through the apprenticeship program. These participants in the programs were struggling with meeting their training markers or getting through that test, but they were doing great. They just couldn't get those academic pieces down. So we've met them, started to learn what accommodations they're going to need and help them navigate that system. And many of them have successfully gotten through that testing with our help. And one person got through the testing and is already a supervisor. So it was just that test that was a barrier, and through our knowledge around disability and what we can do to support somebody, we help to get through that barrier so they could get to the end of that thing. We've also started to we look at how we serve our high school students with disabilities. We created a series of events this year we called Pathways to Paychecks. 2 weeks ago was the Pathways to Paychecks Trades Edition at Fort Peck Community College. We had 60 high school students with disabilities in that area come and learn from the trades about the opportunities. We had about double the students we thought we would be able to serve. So really excited about that. Also partnered with the Department of Military Affairs to do Pathways to Paycheck STEM edition through their STAR-based programming, also doing a STEM edition through MSU here in their engineering department, and then looking at doing Pathways to Paycheck on the outdoors cruise with Fish, Wildlife and Parks up in Glasgow. So that's coming up, but again, just looking at our youth programming differently and really focusing on the high sector, high demand sectors that you guys identified. We are doing our 3rd annual Disability Employment Summit in a couple weeks here. And again, through 406 Jobs, have totally reframed that. Everything will be driven by the high demand sectors. All of our speakers, all of the success stories we're talking about, and all of the work-based learning that will be highlighted through our schools and students will all be tied to those sectors. We also have Sukup Manufacturing, who is a champion for disability employment, coming in from Iowa to talk about how they've implemented and really changed their workforce strategies in a successful way to meet both their job seekers' needs and their business needs. The rest of this is just a lot of data, and I know you're a little behind schedule here. So the other big thing that was updated in our state plan that isn't 406 jobs related is when I last gave you an update in Lewistown, I let you know that the agency did need to close categories 2 and 3. Those are people with significant disabilities and just disabilities. We have 3 categories total. So we were keeping category 1 open to meet the needs of people with the most significant disabilities. And just because of her resource constraints in the state plan cycle, we did request that we close category 1. That means everybody that would apply for services would go on a waiting list. So we can just manage our resources. That is the one mechanism we have to manage the finances within how we serve people. So hopefully that will be coming. And then we don't plan on like having a total wait list where the door will be closed all the way. The plan is to invite people in weekly or monthly as we watch our budget and we determine how many we can afford to invite in. So that's the big thing there. And then we've already started working on the next state plan cycle. So comprehensive statewide needs assessment is up next. And you guys just talked about the comprehensive local needs assessment. I'll be in touch because I have some ideas of how to create some efficiencies around that. Because we just started planning our plans for that this fall. So yeah, that's what we're up to and our updates. Any questions?
Questions from Shanda or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move to the next agenda item as well. We transition. I'll keep it open for public comment if there is any. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Tim Breward. I'm the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of the Heinlein in Havre, Montana. Also here is a representative of the Montana Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs. We have 11 organizations, over 30 clubs across the state. So on behalf of them, I invite you to visit your local club. Amazing things going on there. But we really do appreciate the work that's been done on this plan. We see Boys and Girls Clubs as kind of connecting 2 ways. One, we would echo the comments by the Montana After School Alliance. After school and summer programs are a great way, low cost way, especially clubs, very low cost way for parents to get the support they need to continue their employment journey. So they're great support there, but more and more clubs are finding workforce development to be part of the curriculum that we provide. In Havre, we're looking at opening a new teen center specifically for teens. So we did a big community survey to find out interest and what people are looking for. And we're very interested, and over, I think 400 middle school and high school kids took the survey and a couple hundred parents. And we provided a list of different kinds of programming that might be of interest to them. And the number one pick for parents and students was workforce development. So the kids know that it's a need, the parents know it's a need, and clubs across the state are reaching out to fill that gap. So we look forward to partnering with community partners, with industry partners, and with the SWIB as well. So thanks for the work you're doing. Appreciate it.
Over to you. Or Joe, would you like to start? Oh, yeah.
Show this.
Okay.
Somebody else is driving.
It is.
Oh, you're fine.
The computer's being fussy.
Afternoon all. Portia and the NGA game did such a good job at this morning that I'm going to do a little bit more of an overview. But the goal this morning is this afternoon is to give you a starting sense again of the structure and where we stand with workforce Pell policymaking and implementation. This is a quickly moving, potentially changing process. Jennifer, Owen, and Tammy have worked carefully on some starting frameworks for SWIB to consider. Again, it is SWIB who recommends those frameworks to the governor. And then SWIB over time, who are going to drive some of this process in terms of eligibility and eligibility determination. Just go with it. So again, kind of where we stand right now. We have a proposed rule. There's a notice of proposed rule making that has been published. Over 400 folks across the country have written in to provide comment to that proposed rulemaking. We're waiting on the final stage. But while we're waiting on that final stage, we expect that the structure of workforce Pell is going to remain relatively constant. As we've heard all day, we have a lot of good building blocks to inform how Montana approaches and structures workforce Pell. And so the goal in tomorrow's discussion is to get SWIB's impact and input on this framework so that as we get the final rule, as we approach that July 1st start date when funds can start flowing, that we're as prepared as we can be to give a recommendation to the governor and to get this process set up. If you so desire, you can go and read a very lengthy federal proposed rule by following that QR code.
Have it in my bag.
Yeah,
Anyone
Tammy
wants?
has it in her bag if you need a sleep aid for the evening. If you can go to the next page. So it's useful just to remind you again what federal Pell Grants are. Federal Pell Grants are the main form of need-based aid for post-secondary education. So overall, $33 billion a year, 7 million students are supported through this program. In the state of Montana, what that looks like is close to 11,000 students receiving Pell Grants and just a little bit north of $45 million. I will tell you that in the state of Montana, that means it is dramatically the largest source of need-based aid. There is a good amount of institutionally provided need-based aid, but in terms of helping lower income students afford college education, this is the most important game in town, so to speak, and really, really important in terms of access to training. What the One Big Beautiful Bill Act changed is it changed the length of program that could be eligible. Currently, Pell Grants, you have to be enrolled in a longer certificate program up to a bachelor's degree. You have to be an undergraduate student, so you can't have received a bachelor's degree in the past. You have a lifetime cap on how much funding you can receive over what period of time. This is now saying that that source of funds can be used to support shorter workforce-oriented programs. And the rulemaking that concluded set out both a lot of the accountability measures, but most importantly, what states, governors, state workforce boards have discretion and authority to set as other eligibility components for programs that students could enroll in and get this support for their training costs. Next slide. And I don't expect you all to be able to read this fine. But it summarizes a lot of what Portia went over. The eligible programs are the shorter programs. They have to be, according to the state's definition, in high skill, high wage, or in demand industry sectors. They have to have this characteristic of being stackable, so contribute to further training, and portable, so recognized across state lines or across multiple employers. They have accountability mechanisms. So to be eligible, you have to be able to demonstrate that you've been in operation for a year, that you have a completion rate of 70%, they have a job placement rate of 70% over time, that your earnings from your programs in relationship to the cost of those programs are reasonable, are showing progression. And you have to have a certain number of completers. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, because that's one of the areas of potential challenge for the state of Montana. A lot of Montana programs is how that component of this is implemented. The approval process starts with the state and the governor. So the state workforce board determines an application process that you all need to be consulted in this process. The governor is then attesting that the programs meet some of these accountability requirements, including that SWIB has been consulted. And then the U.S. Department of Education also has eligibility requirements that it determines. Another important thing that I will flag that's specifically important to the state of Montana is that for everything in this rule where you see the word governor, you can substitute the word tribal government. So tribes, if you are, for our tribal colleges and universities, their tribal governance are their approvers of the programs that go to the feds. There's still the requirement to consult with this board in that process. And that's something that we'll want to think carefully about and discuss. And then Portia and the NGA team referenced this. This is a big approval process, a new source of funding. It's also a state infrastructure, data infrastructure requirement, because it's going to be about collecting a lot of information on programs, on training opportunities, where historically we haven't collected a lot of data or found ways that that data link up. And so one of the important components here is how are we bringing all of that infrastructure together? It's not only going to be important for this, it's going to be important for everything else that we're doing, future ready 406 jobs and in other areas. Next slide. And before I turn it over to Tammy to talk through some of the components of this initial framework, I should recognize we're still in progress. We don't have a final rule. There are a few areas where the Fed said, hey, we're particularly interested in getting feedback on this. It's just, we don't expect the rule to change very substantively, but if it does change, it's likely to be in one of these areas. And those are about what happens between now and when the U.S. Department of Education can calculate that value added metric. Are there interim accountability metrics? Small cohort component. So their current plan is to aggregate across 4 years to build up to a cohort of 50 students in a program that they can calculate this value added metric based on. Well, it turns out that for a lot of training programs in the state of Montana that are pretty important, you might not hit 50 graduates over 4 years. State agreements. So your counterpart governors and SWIB boards are having a similar conversation across the country. How can states enter into agreements to rely upon each other's assessment of eligible programs? Written arrangements. This is very much touching on the questions about JATCs this morning. So under U.S. Department of Education guidelines, academic programs can have up to 50% of their program delivered through a partner. That partner can be paid to do that delivery. Currently in the regulation for workforce Pell eligible programs, that would be set at 25%. So should that be increased? What's the process? Who's incorporated in that process? Distance education, and then cohort exclusion. So right now, all students who go through a cohort are included in the value added education, or value added earnings accountability metric. some questions of, well, what happens if a student's going on to further training, to a further degree? Currently, they'd still be counted, and if they're not earning, that can impact your program's eligibility. But what I'll perhaps leave you all with, I think that this is a really great opportunity to align some of our credentials of value conversations that we've been having as a SWIB, to think about our data systems, as well as to provide some new funding sources for students around the state to get training in the areas that you prioritize as the workforce board. A lot of the complexities are we going to be setting up processes that bring us all together, that we can all get through to get to that stage. And I'll say this is, as you can tell, a complicated setup, and one where I think we're gonna have to be strategic on how do we set it up so that we're funding the right things and we're helping programs and institutions get through this process, and then informing students and others in the workforce system of the opportunity that it creates. Cam, can I hand it over to you?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Both on the right, under quality and consumer protection, cost transparency, outcome reporting, gap filling aid concerns. What is that? Gap filling aid concerns.
Yeah, so one of the challenges I believe that that's referencing is these grants are going to be prorated to the length of the program. So a typical Pell Grant tops out a little north of $7,000 a year. But that Pell Grant is over a longer period of time. And so one of the concerns is, hey, we might have some shorter term programs that are really valuable, but also have high costs. And this workforce Pell proration is not going to cover all of those costs. So what are opportunities to braid funding so that this is getting students and trainees who are going through those programs closer to a full tuition level or full cost of what that program might be?
Hey, can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. Good afternoon. We're almost done. Then we'll meet you at the robotics museum. So as we wait for finalization of proposed rule, really our goal today is to give you information. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. We are going to talk about some frameworks, some suggested frameworks, what the process might look like, where state policy might be needed, and hoping that tomorrow, so we presented a lot of information to you today, and we're so thankful for our friends at NGA that spoke to this morning. And then SWIB, we're going to ask you to have further discussion and to vote. And yes, it's going to be a conditional framework because nothing is finalized yet. We're still waiting on that proposed rule. So we're going to go through, we'll convene actually just to kind of give some dates for you. Hoping to get recommendations from SWIB tomorrow. We will continue to wait for that final proposed rule. We will have to have, I think Portia mentioned this morning, so July 1st is when funding will be available. So do we have to have everything in place in complete detail and absolutely perfect by July 1st? We do not, but we want to make sure that we're moving in the direction so that we can offer these programs. So in light of that, once you can do a conditional or maybe not, you might say, no, go back to the drawing board. We don't like that particular framework tomorrow. We will need to convene a special virtual meeting. SWIB, just giving you a heads up that we'll want to do that before the July 1st timeframe. So let's talk about some eligible programs. Joe touched on these. They're offered by a participating institution with the duration, 150 to 599 clock hours, 18 to 15 weeks, offered at appropriate modality. Portable and stackable, I think Portia mentioned that earlier today, which is great, thinking about that. Eligible academic credit means value added earnings test. I'm gonna kind of go through some details in some of these. So an eligible workforce program is truly a program approved by the governor or tribal government. Those are the two approving bodies. After consultation with the State Workforce Innovation Board, so with you, to be offered to students and based on determination that the program meets all of the following criteria, and those criteria are listed here. Go ahead and go to the next one. The program that this is key. This is one of the keys, and Portia talked about this earlier as states think about this. So the program that provides, this is another criteria, education and training in high wage, high skilled, or in-demand industry sector or occupations. Well, we've already identified that in 406 jobs. Montana is ahead of the game. Good job, you guys. Every 2 years, the definition of high wage, high skilled, in-demand sectors is reevaluated because it has to go into the WIOA Perkins State Plan. So with aligning this makes perfect sense. So in the first 2 years, 2026 to 2028, until we submit that next state plan, utilizing the 6 high demand sectors identified in 406 jobs to approve credentials in one of those 6 sectors just makes sense. And then when we start doing our WIOA Perkins planning every 2 years, you know, the SWIB can look at and reassess, are they still with the recommendation, will recommend, the governor will approve, are these still our high in demand sectors? Do we need to pivot? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So another key area that we need to look at is the program meets the hiring requirements of potential employers in those high wage, high skill, in demand sectors or occupations. So what would be the evidence of employer demand? Well, we are fortunate in Montana that 406 jobs helps define this a little bit clearer and can be identified in a few ways. We're suggesting that if the program is offered as a registered apprenticeship, because the employer, by simply being or offering that registered apprenticeship, has already hired that person. Another way is if the program, no, go ahead and stay. Yep, you're good, sorry. The program offers an industry recognized credential issued or endorsed by a state or national industry association, joint labor management industry, or employer consortium. If industry creates the credential, then they are certifying the demand already. Number 3, the program comes recommended by a local sector partnership convened under the 406 jobs framework. So we talked about that. And I'm so excited to be aligning what we're doing in all of these areas. And through those local sector partnerships, that is where the magic is going to happen so that we can truly listen to industry and solve those problems that they need and help our workforce. The 4th is through, or the program is justified through a full employer demand review, which would include looking at the data for a full review to understand how a program would show there is employer demand if it doesn't fall in the above 3 categories. So things to look at could be hiring commitments with employers, MOUs, needs established Montana licensing requirements of an occupation, maybe local market data or employers involved in creating work-based learning experience, or other ways to show that if the program does not fall in those 1 through 3, the apprenticeship, the industry credential, or been developed through those local sector partnerships, they have to just go through more of a full review. So if you think about the work our economists are already doing in the realm of evaluation of in-demand jobs, this is something they can easily provide to the SWIB on a regular basis. And the governor and the legislature already started this work around industry recognized credentials with the STARS Act credential registry. And so even though the intent of that registry initially was more focused on middle and high school students, the mechanism is there that expanding it would just make sense. So having a repository for all recognized credentials will also simplify use for employers. So I think it's worth noting here that with both the STARS Act and Workforce Pell, we should really be thinking about very specific and clear that one employer working with one institution does not, make the program industry recognized. Think of those local sector partnerships and it's broader than that. Both federal and state policies push in the direction of credentials that are recognized and portable. So language that says if you are not in the first three categories, then you must go through a demand review, which should include more in-depth engagement and engagement from more than one employer. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's kind of the program. Let's kind of talk about suggestions for a program approval process. And I know you've got a couple of lengthy documents prior, so hopefully you've done your homework, board members. So let's talk about the possible steps for a program approval process. For ease, an institution can propose a program at any time. We are suggesting that Workforce Services Division, which has an MOU with SWIB to provide staffing support. So we will ask them to do an initial review of application for completeness, just for completeness only, and to identify if it's a program that may not have a lot of people participating, which would then be flagged as a possible small cohort. And I'm going to talk about that at the end. Number 3 would be once applications have gone through the initial review and are complete, we are recommending that SWIB approve these for the governor recommendation 2 times a year at the fall SWIB meeting and at the spring SWIB meeting. So as a reminder, if the application is, I'm going to go back to those 3 things first. If it's linked to a registered apprenticeship, if it's linked to an industry recognized credential, or if it's recommended by a 406 sector partnership, it will be automatically approved and fast-tracked. Which again, just supports that framework that you guys built and approved to help modernize Montana's workforce. After SWIB provides its recommendations, either the governor or the tribal government approves for certification, and then it goes to the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education will do a preliminary approval, and then after the first year, they do what's called a value-added earnings analysis, and that is where the data parts does get really tricky that Joe was talking about. So the U.S. Department of Education will put together a cohort of 50 people completing the program who have received Workforce Pell funding. And the difference between that median wage and 150% of the poverty line becomes the tuition and fee gap. So in Montana, we will most likely struggle where there are 50 people completing it and receiving Workforce Pell. Truly, this was really more designed for urban states than it was for rural Montana. But things could change. The final rule is not out there yet. The proposed rule does they ask states to weigh in, and since we really don't know what the final guidance will be on this, developing a small cohort policy may help. And here's what we're suggesting there. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So for Montana, if a program can't meet that 50% threshold, we could do our own data analysis of wages, similar programs across institution findings, and try to put together our own cohort based on our data and propose it to the feds. Ultimately, the feds retain control, so we do not know if the smaller cohort analysis will be accepted. It's in everybody's interest to work together to try to get a larger cohort, because if you can only show 3 or 4 people completing, and if they've received Workforce Pell Grant funding, then their wages will control the tuition and fees. If you have a couple of people get low-paying jobs, this could put institutions in a financial bind. This is an area where we have to work on. And it's also an area that will raise data privacy concerns because the proposed rule indicates that we will send participant level data to the feds. That includes their earnings and employment information because that's what they will use to make up their 50% cohort. We will have to work through data gathering, data privacy, and monitoring for performance. So it is a big lift, just like Joe had said. If programs drop below a federally established threshold of less than 70% of completing a program on time, or 70% of people getting placed in the occupation outside of the credential, they will not be deemed ineligible. So they will be deemed ineligible. So developing an appeal process should be worked through as well, which falls into the items, not yet developed, along with some long-term data collection and use policies. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We truly need to simplify where we can. Montana is ahead of the game because the governor has already identified what our high skill, high wage, in-demand sectors are, as well as provided a streamlined framework through 406 jobs. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have those key remaining. These haven't been developed. Again, long-term data collection. We've got systems that need to continue to work together and figure out what this process might be. We'll have an appeals process. We can always do this for a year and then reevaluate. At no point are we recommending anything, go into to ARM. These are policy documents voted on by the SWIB. We need the flexibility, so it's not regulatory. That would be a suggestion. The state has discretion in 3 or 4 areas, and the rule is clear on what is an eligible program, what is the process to approve an eligible program, and some amount of data collection, and what we do with very small programs. So go ahead and go to the next slide. We have an amazing opportunity to make this work as another avenue that people can get the training that they need in a short amount of time and get into the workforce and meet the workforce need of Montana.
Can you combine with another state to meet the core?
That's just a good question. Dwayne just asked if you can combine with another state to meet the cohort. And I think, Joe, I'm not sure on that. I think that you can.
So,
Maybe
I can try and be loud. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think that's when that bilateral agreement component comes into play. So for a program to be offered to students in another state, you need agreement from both of those states' governors to enter into an agreement with each other that they're both going to recognize that as an eligible program. In that case, those sort of programs could enroll students across state lines and hit those thresholds. One of the challenges is that they did that in that way for a particular reason. They could have said governors can enter into a reciprocity agreement that is multi-state. And intentionally in the process, they said they didn't want to do that because they wanted these programs to be more about regional employers and industry driving the program mix and demand. So at least for now, that would be the likely process, is that our governor would have to work with other governors on a bilateral basis to approve programs. And NGA colleagues might have much deeper and better informed answers to that than I provided.
Yeah, that sounds right. If the state alone can't meet the cohort requirement, then either the bilateral agreement or that kind of 25% agreement with an institution that is not a Title IV. Perhaps they also just have outreach to other students that could be combined to meet that cohort requirement too, but
that looking to increase at all, or do you think it'll stay at the 25%?
sure.
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's saying, at least what we statute.
Yeah, I kind of expect that will stay. I mean, part of this is to say, the other component there is that when higher education institutions for Pell Grants can use 50% of the education with an outside entity, that 25 to 50% requires an institutional higher education accreditor's review and approval. And one of the concerns here as well is other systems changing. Higher education accreditors have historically accredited or reviewed a lot of these shorter term training pathways and programs. And so perhaps that will change over time as the department and accreditors build new processes and policies to assess it.
Can you clarify, just, I might have a follow-up question, but I want to make sure I understand. The cohort of 50 completers, is that within a higher ed program or at a state level? What's the threshold that's we're concerned about when we have an Idaho or another state question?
Yep.
So it's within an approved program over the course of up to 4 years. And so if you are an approved program offered by a higher ed institution, currently we'd anticipate you'd have to get 50 completers over 4 years to remain eligible.
Because workforce Pell only Title IV institution hires are the only ones allowed to get the workforce Pell. That's.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm talking to Josh, so, and the reason that he's answering that is because right now, workforce Pell, higher education institutions, Title IV, they're the only ones eligible for the workforce Pell. Yes, okay, so the program has to be offered in that realm. Good afternoon, everyone. Question about the small cohort policy. So in that development of that policy that we're talking about, who would submit that? Is that OPI, DLI, and OCHI together developing that? Or I know we have some say in it, but would that be submitted to the U.S. Department of Education as a group effort, or who would own that? And then my second question is, we can't be the only state who's struggling with the ruralness. I'm kind of going off what you said, Dwayne. So can we work with our other partners? I'm sure they're having the same conversations we are. So I'm just wondering if we can share information and work together.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I can respond to the rural piece. No. We often say that every governor is a rural governor, right? Because there are just more rural areas than there are urban centers. And to the earlier point that was made, I don't think that that was the design of Workforce Pell, that it would extend, be so far reaching, right? Because we have to think practically about the pot of money that Workforce Pell is pulling from and the demands that already exist on Pell money. And how just fickle that has been year over year, and the cost of college increasing while Workforce Pell is being added. And so when we think about that, I think the administration was putting a lot of barriers in place to make it such that only a select few programs are eligible. So then it doesn't become a larger financial challenge. Now, to that end, some of the more rural states that we've been speaking to have either decided to, frankly, just opt out in that they are not as focused on designing programs to meet Workforce Pell because so few qualify. And then there are some that are just taking their time and thinking about the first year as a pilot year, and then utilizing that on-ramp to build programs that will adjust and meet the requirement. Now, that is not to say that these final rules, something fantastic come out of them and it magically expands access. I believe in magic. And it's not to say that over years, as the administration observes uptake, that there won't be a change. But as it stands, it is narrow, I think for that reason. I don't want that to be discouraging, but it is designed so that there are a few programs that qualify, and hopefully that widens, with more data.
Recognize Dr. Hall for a question online.
Well, I think one of the things is that what you're describing is a divestiture in education. And I feel like what's required, one thing is your reciprocity agreement is with the tribes, because that's your first entity for the consultation requirement. So to look outward toward other states, I think is premature, when I think the energy should be invested in helping us figure out how we're going to do this as tribes, which ultimately students, benefit statewide. All the tribal colleges in Montana serve Montana residents as well. So that's really important to also note. But wouldn't it be possible for the SWIB board to say, these are the programs that are currently offered that meet the base hour criteria per the department regs, and grandfather current programs into that, versus having all programs apply and be a part of this large endeavor of paperwork, and meet on those 6 standards as to what those metrics should be. I feel like a pilot year would benefit every college, because there are no financial aid directors that I know of who are in the room who have to implement this program and be intentional about how they are going to utilize their services in helping get this rolled out. I know they would probably benefit from that. And I can hear my financial aid director saying, not another thing. The data that we suggest, I think, should be meaningful to us. And I think that they're actually giving us an opportunity to be unique. It doesn't mean it's going to be the easy way there, but I think it's worth doing that because of some of those major challenges. That's what I would recommend. It just feels like we want to eliminate the amount of busy work this is going to be for people who are already busy, who are going to go into sessions this summer to learn about all the regulations and changes. And they're going to want us to be responsive to that.
Thank you, Dr. Hall.
Any other public comment? Commissioner Swanson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I took away the first time we dug into one of these sessions as a Department of Workforce and Health with our friends at OG, and what's continued to be a question I've asked myself ever since, is because we're a rural state, because of the size of our training programs, is the juice worth the squeeze in workforce health? And that's a real consideration we've been evaluating. After all of that, my recommendation, and I think our friends in the governor's office and OG agree, is that at least in a trial period, it is. Let's try it and see what happens. And let's come back together again at probably the same time of the year meeting next year, which will be right as our friends in the legislature are wrapping up their policy input into this sort of work. And let's make another decision then if we still think it's worthwhile. But I don't see a reason not to dive in. This is a big opportunity. Let's try it. So with that framing, if you all agree that we should jump in the deep end of the pool and see what happens, there's 3 things that still kind of keep me up at night. One of which is tribal consultation. And so I do want to speak to you about that. There was a real chance as we started developing this strategy that Montana would have had 9 workforce health frameworks for Montana. Because as you heard say earlier, each tribal nation sovereignly gets to make their own recommendation for workforce health. Because of many of you in this room that have incredible relationships with our tribal partners, and because the Department of Labor is one of the only agencies that has a full tribal consultation plan and commitment, we've been hard at work with our tribal leaders and each of our tribal college presidents through Donnie Wetzel, the Department of Labor's tribal liaison. And so as of now, everyone is in agreement to jumping in together with the same framework. For a year, unless it happens. That is part, not all, of the reason that Dr. Brad Hall from the Blackfeet Community College is a member of SWIB at this point, to make sure that as they are experiencing this with us on the ground moving forward, we get real-time input from tribal college presidents like Dr. Hall, and he's agreed to be their spokesperson. There's a lot we don't know, but tribal consultation is important. And as we jump into this small cohort and outcome-based metrics conversation, having 9 different frameworks seemed worse than 1. And so I'm confident that our tribal liaison can support us in this, and then we'll continue to check back in with SWIB quarterly. The second thing that is really keeping me up at night is that program certification. We could create lots of really complex ways to certify programs through lots of different mechanisms. My recommendation, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, is that SWIB certify programs, because you are already meeting both in subcommittees and quarterly, and we've already got employers pretty used to coming through this front door. So as programs are looking to be certified, at least in its infancy, my recommendation is that you as SWIB members agree to take this on. You'll have to say yes. So think about that tonight while you're passing and turning like me. And then last but not least, that the registry or the repository of those industry recognized credentials keeps me up all the time, not just for Workforce Pell. What are credentials of value? What are the definitions? You're seeing it too. Every state has their own framing of definition. Everyone's trying to crack this code. Our legislature stepped into this arena with us as partners last session with House Bill 252, the STARS Act, and they really deliberately created a mechanism for the Department of Labor to have a credential registry in administrative rule. I believe they did that because of their strong belief in sunlight, and that the public administrative rules process gives them lots of checkpoints as legislators to lean into. And so we have that credential registry in place for middle and high school and young adult credentials. My suggestion to all of you that I'll make tomorrow is that we also utilize this for Workforce Pell, which means adding additional credentials moving forward. What are those higher level credentials that are probably not attainable for a middle and high schooler, but let's get them on the repository anyway. I go back to my days as a private employer, and I just think I would absolutely hate as an employer to navigate multiple credential registries. We've got one authorized in statute. We're going to take a couple of liberties in expanding it. We're going to ask our friends in the legislature to weigh in January at this decision. But in order to streamline effort and outcome, tribal consultation, annual program certification, and credential registry, our suggestion is that we utilize the SWIB and the tribal liaison team at the department to solve for all 3 for now, while we jump in this deep end and see how this works for Montana. Open to your feedback into the evening and throughout tomorrow when we are actually making decisions. But I think that makes it easier for our employers to walk through one front door. We worked so hard together over the last 3 doors to teach or retrain our employers that the SWIB is their front door. If you're willing to take that responsibility on, I'd like to invite you to do that.
Think about it. Any other comments? You're on time. Impressive. Oh, Dr. Hall, we have one more comment.
I have a question regarding the identification of programs using the federal system. Is it likely that we're going to have to match those programs, which probably may not exist, with any kind of, they call them SIP codes, which is what connects each degree of program into a certain category? So for example, it has an emphasis and a number assigned to it in the federal system. They need that in order to verify that through financial aid. And then you have the accreditation documents, which now in this sense, I'm reading this as, industry standards set by certifications and licensures provided by the state. And so I'm viewing this as also a burden on state agencies to be able to match the energy behind this, because we may not be connected as much as we are. So either the Department of Education federal model or those individual licensing agencies that may not be at the table either right now.
Dr. Hall, this is Joe Teal. So I don't know some of this for certain because as with many things in this process, I think it's to be determined. I absolutely anticipate that as part of the institutional eligibility application process, they're going to request what zip codes the program is in. And that's going to be one thing which Department of Labor economists are very good at, is how that corresponds to the occupational categories that we prioritize in 406 Montana jobs. But that's going to be, I think, one of the questions is this translation between industries and occupations in educational programs. And to your second question, I think that the data interconnections here are going to be the biggest missing link and challenge from where we stand now to, students and programs receiving funding through this to support training. And there's a lot that, both I think on the U.S. Department of Education and for most states, frankly, doesn't yet exist. And I think there's going to be some creativity and some leaps of faith and a lot of discussions and valid discussions to Commissioner Swanson's point about timelines and the juice and the squeeze of what that will look like and how we build it so that it is effective rather than burdensome. All that being said, I do think to a lot of the conversations today, short-term training outside of traditional higher education, blending different training pathways is becoming a lot more important. And if it's becoming more important, it's maybe important also that we have data systems and reporting to help us measure if it's yielding what we expect.
I may make one last comment as we're wrapping that up. And the reality of industry is that sequential education model from elementary to secondary or post-secondary doesn't really exist in the business world. It doesn't also end at the end of post-secondary. We carry on into a career, the investments in training and education well into 30s, 40s, 50s, retirement is very real. And maybe this is an opportunity to think about that model.
I'm sorry if I can. So the reason I bring up the SIP codes is because that could be the way that we align programs without being prescriptive as to what that program looks like. You can get really creative using what the SIP codes are linked as, and I would recommend sticking with that same designation when we approve what programs can be accredited under this new state requirement. So again, that would release the burden on a lot of people in the financial aid world to have to come up with new codes, code them differently. So if we could get a view of what those SIP codes look like, we know what programs we can look toward within those 6 areas, certifying as eligible programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Hall. Just to kind of recap on your earlier conversation or questions around the energy and the effort and all the data collection. We have a number of our economists here in the room with us today. The rest of them, I'm certain, are tuned in from home, paying attention today. You have our full commitment. And more importantly, I know you have my cell phone number. So if you think we're not engaging enough, you let me know. This is going to be a joint effort with the tribal colleges, OCHI, and our economists, probably day in and day out, or at least week in and week out over this first year. And you've got our commitment that it's going to get all the energy it needs. We're just really going to have to lump through this together and see how it works.
With that, unless there's any other public comment, we are going to adjourn the meeting. I will, real quickly, this evening, if you're available, we'll have a reception at the American Computers and Robotics Museum from 5:30 to 7. 2023 Stadium Drive, Suite 1A. And then, tomorrow morning, if, hopeful everyone is available, at 8:30 to tour the Williams Plumbing Training Academy. And that's at 3070 Companion Way in Belgrade.
I'll give a quick instruction. So our shop is just off of Jackrabbit, if you're coming up into Belgrade. You turn on the Companion and kind of towards the back, you'll see a large office building. If you're coming to that, ideally park, you'll see a bunch of fab shop, big warehouse bays. I'll have some signs out there, but I'd like to have it parked there because we're gonna start in the meeting room, work through our fab shop and then our actual academy, hands-on training lab. That, goes on the other end of the property, so we'll have a quick little drive in the middle of that our time. Yeah.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it is.